The night at St. Mary's Hospital was like any other, chaotic and restless. The sound of ambulances arriving and departing, the hurried voices of doctors and nurses, and the constant hum of monitors filled the air. The automatic doors slid open with a distinctive clatter, allowing the icy cold of winter to briefly enter the heated room. Sheila Carter, the head nurse, was standing at the reception desk, typing into the system the details of a patient who had just been admitted. Her mind was divided between her work and the accumulated fatigue of the night shift, but the sound of soft, irregular footsteps caught her attention. She looked up and saw a little girl coming through the automatic doors. The child was barefoot, wearing a coat that looked like it belonged to someone much bigger. Her brown hair was disheveled, and her pale, dirty face reflected the cold light of the hospital. But what caught Sheila's eye was what she was carrying in her arms, a newborn baby wrapped in an old, worn-out blanket. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The other patients at the reception desk looked up, confused, and even the security guard near the entrance straightened up, as if anticipating an emergency. Sheila, used to unusual situations, quickly realized that something was terribly wrong. She dropped everything and ran over to the little girl. Kneeling at the child's height, Sheila tried to make eye contact, but the girl's eyes were fixed on the floor, as if she were fighting a silent panic. "Hey, sweetheart," Sheila began, in the softest voice she could manage. "My name is Sheila. It's okay, you're safe here. Who's that you're carrying?" The girl looked up and Sheila saw her big, frightened eyes, but there was something else, an unwavering determination, something unusual for someone so young. "This is Gabriel," she replied, almost in a whisper. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't drunk water for hours. "He's my brother, my mother. My mother needs help. Please." Sheila noticed the tremor in her voice and noticed how her arms seemed tired from holding the baby. Approaching carefully, she signaled for a medical team to approach. 2 nurses came with a makeshift stretcher for the newborn. "It's all right, darling. We'll take care of both of you." "Do you trust me?" Sheila asked, holding out her hand. The girl hesitated. Her breathing was heavy, and her eyes wandered around the room as if looking for a way out. But finally, she nodded. Sheila watched as Olivia reluctantly handed the baby over to the nurses. Gabriel let out a small moan, and the sound seemed to echo in Olivia's heart like a stab wound. She took a step forward, as if to follow her brother, but Sheila put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let's make sure he's okay, shall we? Now, I want you to tell me what happened. We also want to help your mother." Olivia looked at Sheila, her expression a mixture of fear and relief. She wasn't sure whether she could trust that woman or the hospital, but she knew she had no choice. She had to be strong, as her mother always said. Sheila led Olivia into a small triage room, away from the noise of the emergency room. The room was simple, with faded beige walls and a gurney in the center. Olivia sat down in the chair next to it, her dirty hands still shaking. Sheila offered her a glass of water, but the girl barely managed to hold it without spilling. "Breathe, darling. You're safe now. Just tell me what happened," Sheila insisted patiently. For a long moment, Olivia didn't answer. She seemed to be deciding whether to trust this stranger. Finally, with an even lower voice, she began to speak. "We ran away from home," Olivia began, staring at the floor. "My mother said it was dangerous to stay. My father, he drinks a lot, and when he drinks, he hurts us." Sheila felt a shiver run up her spine. She had heard similar stories before, but it never failed to shock her. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Olivia. You were very brave to come here. What happened to your mother?" Olivia hesitated again, biting her lower lip. She wanted to be strong, but the words seemed to weigh on her tongue. She was pregnant with Gabriel. "He was born last night, but—" Her voice faltered, and the tears finally started to fall. "She didn't wake up afterwards. I tried everything. I called her several times, but she didn't answer. And I didn't know what to do. So I grabbed Gabriel and ran over here. Sheila held Olivia's hands, trying to convey comfort. You did the right thing, Olivia. You saved your brother. We'll send an ambulance to pick up your mother now. We'll take care of everything. Olivia shook her head, as if trying to believe the nurse's words, but the fear was still there, lodged deep in her eyes. What if my father finds us? He'll hurt us again. He always finds a way. Sheila felt her stomach turn. The responsibility of protecting those children seemed greater with every word that came out of Olivia's mouth. She gently squeezed the girl's hands. That won't happen, darling. I promise you. We'll make sure you and Gabriel are safe. While Sheila was looking after Olivia, Dr. Madison Hodge was called in to supervise the case. Madison was known for her competence and empathy. As soon as she heard about the situation, she quickly organized a team to go to the place where Olivia said her mother was. Send an ambulance immediately. Take support for any obstetric emergency, said Madison, putting on her lab coat. However, something was nagging at the back of her mind. Olivia had mentioned her father, and Madison knew that domestic violence situations were rarely simple. She requested that hospital security be alerted in case Timothy tried to show up. As the team left, Madison made a point of checking on Gabriel's condition. The baby was being monitored in the neonatal ICU, and although he was dehydrated and a little weak, his condition was stable. He's a little warrior just like his sister, Madison commented to the nurse next to her. But something tells me that this story isn't over yet. She was right. In the small triage room, Olivia clasped her hands in her lap. Her skinny, dirty fingers gripped the fabric of her threadbare jacket tightly, as if it were the last thing keeping her anchored to reality. Sheila sat in front of her, maintaining a calm and welcoming expression, but inside, her heart ached for what this little girl had already endured. You said your mother is in the trailer where you live, right? Sheila asked, leaning forward slightly. Can you tell me how you got there? Olivia took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to answer was a battle. Finally, she nodded slowly, her eyes roaming around the room as if she were reliving memories. It was a few months ago. Maybe more. I'm not sure. She paused, biting her lower lip. My mother decided that we couldn't stay with my father anymore. He wasn't good. When he drank, he got very angry. He'd break things. He shouted at us. Sometimes... Her voice faltered and she lowered her eyes. Sometimes he hurt my mother. Sheila felt her throat tighten, but she didn't interrupt. She knew that Olivia needed space to continue at her own pace. One day, he hurt her so badly that she couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. I had to get her food and water because he didn't care. After that, she said we had to leave, that he would never change. Olivia swallowed, her hands gripping her coat even tighter. The memory seemed vivid in her mind, every detail burning like fire. We left the house late one night when he was asleep. My mother said it was our only chance. She put everything we had in 2 bags, some clothes, some food, and our Bible. She said it would protect us. Sheila made a mental note of the deep bond between Olivia and her mother. The girl spoke of her with admiration, almost as if Bree were an invincible heroine. It was clear that Olivia had learned the strength of resilience from her mother. So what? Sheila encouraged, keeping her voice low and soft. We took a bus as far as we could. My mother had some money stashed away, but not much. After that, we walked until we found the trailer. It was abandoned, but she said it was our new home. Olivia gave a small smile, but it was brief and melancholy. It wasn't much, but we were safe. For the first time. Sheila nodded, trying to convey confidence. It must have been difficult, but your mother did everything she could to protect you and Gabriel. She used to say that Gabriel was a miracle. Olivia continued, looking at her hands. Even when everything seemed to go wrong, she said that God sent Gabriel to save us, that he was our angel. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Olivia's irregular breathing. Sheila reached out and gently touched Olivia's hand. "And you were Gabriel's angel today, Olivia. You saved his life by bringing him here." Olivia looked at Sheila for the first time since she had started talking. There was something in her eyes, perhaps hope, perhaps disbelief, but she said nothing. While Olivia was telling her story, Dr. Madison Hodge and her team were on their way to the location indicated by the girl. The hospital had sent an ambulance and a support car, each loaded with medical supplies. Madison kept her hands firmly in her lap, trying to ignore the cold seeping through her coat. She was an experienced professional, but something about this case stirred something deep within her. Perhaps it was Olivia's courage or the idea of a pregnant woman fighting alone to protect her children. "We're almost there, Doctor," said the driver, breaking the silence. Madison looked out of the window. The city lights had been left behind, and now they were driving along a deserted road surrounded by tall, shady trees. The GPS indicated that the trailer was located in an isolated area, far from any neighborhood. Finally, the vehicle stopped in front of a small, rusty trailer. The windows were covered with makeshift curtains, and the door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Madison felt a chill, but didn't hesitate. Grabbing her medical bag, she walked to the entrance, followed by two paramedics. "Bree!" Madison called out, her voice echoing in the silence. There was no reply. She carefully pushed the door open and entered. The interior was small and disorganized, but clean enough to show that someone was trying to keep the place habitable. A narrow bed was leaning against one of the walls, and a makeshift table held a few items. An empty plate, a half-empty bottle of water, and a Bible with frayed pages. On the sofa, Bree lay. Her eyes were closed, and her expression was serene, almost as if she were asleep. But Madison knew the moment she looked at her that it was too late. "She's not responding," said Madison, with controlled calm. "Check her vital signs." One of the paramedics quickly approached and confirmed the obvious. Bree had died. Madison closed her eyes for a moment, holding the case tightly. She'd been a doctor for years, but she never got used to these scenes, especially when they involved young mothers fighting against all the odds. On the table next to Bree, Madison saw a folded piece of paper. She picked up the note and read the words written in hurried handwriting. "If anything happens to me, please take care of Olivia and Gabriel. They are everything to me. He can't find them." Madison felt a tightness in her chest. This woman had given everything to protect her children. She looked at the paramedic next to her. "Let's take her body. She deserves a proper burial, and make sure the police are informed about the children's father." The man nodded, and Madison looked back at Bree. "I promise we'll take care of them. You did everything you could." The team returned to the hospital with Bree's body early in the morning. The cold, grey light of dawn was already coming through the reception windows, but inside the hospital the atmosphere was somber. Madison knew she would have to tell Olivia what had happened. She mentally prepared herself for this as she walked down the corridor towards the room where the girl was waiting. When she entered the room, she found Olivia sitting on the edge of the gurney. The girl was hugging her knees, her empty gaze fixed on the floor. Sheila was beside her, holding her hand, but Olivia didn't seem to notice. "Olivia," began Madison, her voice low and hesitant. She crouched down to get on the girl's level. "I need to talk to you about your mother." Olivia immediately looked up. There was something between hope and dread in them, and Madison felt her heart squeeze. How could she tell something so devastating to a child who had already lost so much? "We went to the trailer, as you told us. We found your mother." Madison paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. "But she didn't make it, Olivia. I'm so sorry." For a moment there was only silence. Olivia's face remained still, but her eyes began to glisten with tears. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to deny reality. "No," she murmured. "No, she's strong. She always said we'd be fine." Madison felt the tears begin to well up in her own eyes, but she kept her composure. Her mother was strong, Olivia, stronger than most people. She did everything she could to take care of you and Gabriel. But now, she needs you to continue being strong for him. He still needs you. The words seemed to break through Olivia's emotional barrier. She began to sob, the sound of her pain echoing through the small room. Sheila immediately embraced her, and Olivia clung to her as if she were her last anchor. Madison, speechless, stood there, observing the moment with respect and sadness. Meanwhile, at the local police station, Timothy, Olivia's father, was being questioned. He had been arrested a few hours earlier, found in a bar in a state of drunkenness so profound that he could barely keep his eyes open. But now, sober and angry, he was more aggressive. "Where are my children?" he shouted, slamming his hand on the metal table in front of him. "They're mine! Nobody can take them away from me." The detective in front of him, a tall, serious-looking man called Arthur Gaines, crossed his arms. He had dealt with men like Timothy before, controlling, abusive, and completely blind to the damage they were doing to their families. "Your children are safe, Timothy, and after everything we've heard about what you've done, there's no chance of you getting anywhere near them." "That's a lie," Timothy shouted again. "Bree was always to blame. She wanted to keep me away from my children. She manipulated everything. I never hurt anyone." Arthur raised an eyebrow, his patience clearly wearing thin. He pulled out a pile of papers, detailed records of various accusations made by Bree over the last few years. Photos of bruises, testimonies from neighbors, medical records. It was a pile of evidence that was impossible to ignore. "So you're telling me this is all a fabrication, that Bree hit herself, that her 11-year-old daughter is lying?" Arthur asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. Timothy didn't answer. He looked away, but the hatred in his expression remained. Arthur knew that this kind of man would never admit his mistakes, but he didn't need to. The system had enough evidence to keep him away from the children, at least for the time being. However, there was something else that bothered Arthur. Timothy seemed to know something that he wasn't revealing. It was as if he had a card hidden away, waiting for the right moment to play it. Back at the hospital, Madison's attention was completely on Olivia and Gabriel. The baby was recovering well in the neonatal ICU, and Olivia had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional weight of the last few hours. Madison, however, knew that Olivia's rest would be short-lived. There were still so many uncertainties about their future. Madison met with Winslow, the social worker assigned to the case. Winslow was a practical but empathetic woman with years of experience in dealing with children at risk. "We need to decide what to do next, Doctor," said Winslow, as she took a sip of her coffee. "The father is in prison, but he still has legal rights. We need to act quickly." Madison sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She looked up at the hospital window, where the first rays of sunlight were illuminating the city. After a few moments of silence, she finally spoke. "I want to take care of them. I want to offer Olivia and Gabriel a home." Winslow looked at her, surprised but not shocked. Madison had always had a huge heart, but this was a bigger step than anything she had ever done. "Are you sure about this, Madison? It's not going to be easy. Olivia has been through a lot. It will take time for her to trust you." "I know that," Madison replied, her voice firm. "But I also know that these children need someone to fight for them. And if it's not me, who will it be?" Winslow nodded slowly. "I'll start the legal procedures. But be prepared. This is not going to be a simple battle." While the first steps towards adopting Olivia and Gabriel were being taken, Timothy was making his own move. He had managed to contact a lawyer willing to fight for his paternal rights, using legal loopholes to contest custody. Madison's phone rang that night. It was Winslow with worrying news. "Timothy is trying to regain custody. He's hired a lawyer, and they're going to argue that he was wrongfully removed. They want an emergency hearing. Madison felt her blood run cold. She knew that Timothy was a danger to the children, but the legal system wasn't always fair. She would have to fight, not just as a doctor, but as someone willing to be the family that Olivia and Gabriel needed. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed through the room, bringing a tense silence. Olivia was sitting next to Madison and Winslow, her small hands clenching nervously on the arm of the chair. She was wearing a simple outfit that the hospital had provided, but her face still bore the traces of the night before. Next to her, Gabriel, just a few days old, was sleeping peacefully in a baby carrier. Across the room, Timothy was sitting with his lawyer. He looked clean and tidy, but his stiff posture and cold eyes betrayed his tension. For Timothy, this wasn't about his children, it was about control. He wanted to take back what he considered his and prove that he still had power over the situation. The judge, a middle-aged woman called Diane Rogers, glanced at the papers on her desk before adjusting her glasses and looking at Timothy. "Mr. Timothy Sanders, you were recently arrested on domestic violence charges. You are now contesting the removal of your parental rights and requesting custody of Olivia and Gabriel Sanders. Is that it?" Timothy leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "That's right, Your Honor. Those are my children. And with all due respect, no one can look after them better than I can." Diane gave him a skeptical look, but maintained her professional neutrality. "I have extensive documentation here about the abuse you inflicted on your wife and daughter. There are also medical records and complaints. How can you justify this?" Timothy's lawyer, a thin man with a calculating expression, stood up. "Your Honor, my client recognizes that he has made mistakes in the past, but he is seeking rehabilitation. He believes that breaking up a family is not the solution. Furthermore, there is no evidence that he would be a danger to the newborn baby." Madison, until then silent, leaned over and whispered to Winslow, "That's absurd. He put Bree in the hospital several times. What more proof do you need?" Winslow stood up, asking for permission to speak. The judge nodded, and she began. "Your Honor, these children have been through deeper trauma than many people experience in a lifetime. Their mother, Bree Sanders, has devoted her last months trying to protect them from Timothy. We have enough evidence to show that he is a danger. My client, Dr. Madison Hodge, is offering to provide a safe and stable home for Olivia and Gabriel." Olivia's eyes shot to Madison. This was news to her. Although she knew Madison was looking after them, the idea of someone wanting to adopt them seemed distant and surreal. Timothy stood up abruptly. "Are you saying you're going to hand my children over to a stranger? That's ridiculous. They're my blood." Diane banged the gavel again. "Mr. Sanders, sit down. If you raise your voice again, I will order you removed from this room." Timothy sat down, but his face was red with anger. Olivia slumped in her chair, her nails almost piercing the upholstery as she watched her father. He had always been like that, explosive, unpredictable. She knew he would never change. The hearing continued, and the most difficult moment arrived. Olivia was called to the stand. She looked at Madison and Winslow for courage before getting up and walking to the bench. The judge looked at her sympathetically. "Olivia, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me the truth about what your life was like with your father." Olivia took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the microphone as if it would give her strength. She looked at Timothy for a moment, but quickly looked away. The hatred and contempt in his eyes were clear. He was bad," Olivia began, her voice shaking. "When he drank, he screamed a lot. He broke things. Once he threw a bottle at my mother. She tried to hide it, but I saw the blood." Timothy shook his head, but remained silent. His lawyer looked uncomfortable, but didn't interrupt. "He hurt my mother almost every day. When she became pregnant with Gabriel, he said the baby wasn't his. He said she was a liar. He got worse after that. Do you think he would be a good father to you and Gabriel? Diane asked, leaning forward slightly. Olivia shook her head vigorously. No, he never loved us. He just wanted to control us. My mother said we had to run away to be safe, and now she's dead because of him. The words fell like a bomb into the room. Timothy looked at Olivia incredulously but said nothing. Diane nodded slowly and thanked Olivia for her courage. She returned to her seat next to Madison, who held her hand. While Diane reviewed the documents, Timothy's lawyer made an unexpected move. He presented an envelope to the judge. Your Honor, I believe this may be relevant to the custody decision. Diane opened the envelope and read the documents with an expression that gradually changed from surprise to indignation. She looked at Timothy and then at Madison. According to this paternity test, Timothy Sanders is not Gabriel's biological father. A murmur went through the room. Olivia looked at Madison, confused and frightened. Timothy, however, exploded with anger. That's a lie! That baby is mine! This woman betrayed me! The judge banged his gavel again. Mr. Sanders, control yourself. This document was issued by a reliable laboratory. The result is clear. You are not the biological father of the newborn. Timothy was paralyzed, his expression oscillating between shock and anger. Madison leaned towards Winslow and whispered, That changes everything, doesn't it? Winslow nodded, a small smile appearing on his lips. Yes, he no longer has any rights over Gabriel. Olivia looked at Timothy, and something inside her finally ignited. She realized that the man in front of her no longer had any power over them, not over her, not over Gabriel. Diane looked at Madison. Dr. Hodge, are you willing to proceed with the adoption of both children? Madison stood up, her voice firm. Yes, Your Honor. I want to give Olivia and Gabriel the home they deserve. The judge deliberated for a few moments before announcing his decision. Custody of Olivia and Gabriel will be granted to Dr. Madison Hodge. As for Timothy Sanders, you are forbidden to come into contact with the children or go near them under any circumstances. The words were final. Timothy screamed, but was quickly escorted out of the room by 2 officers. Olivia watched, feeling something she hadn't felt for a long time. Relief. Madison knelt down next to Olivia and took her hand. Let's go home, sweetheart. Finally. The fight wasn't over yet, but at that moment, Olivia knew she was no longer alone. The hospital corridors seemed less cold as Madison, Olivia, and Gabriel passed through them together for the last time. Little Olivia held Madison's hand tightly, while Gabriel slept in a baby carrier that Madison was carrying. The hospital staff, who had gathered to say goodbye, applauded discreetly, wishing the new family luck. Olivia looked back one last time, her eyes lingering on the figure of Sheila, who gave her a warm smile and waved. The girl felt a pang of sadness. Although the hospital was not her home, it had been the first place she had felt protected since she had run away with her mother. "Are you ready?" Madison asked, interrupting her thoughts. Olivia looked at her, and after a moment's hesitation nodded. "I'm ready." Madison's house was cozy, located in a quiet neighborhood with tall trees lining the street. Olivia remained silent as Madison opened the door and turned on the lights. The interior was cozy, with warm wood tones and furniture that seemed to have history. But for Olivia, it was an alien landscape. She had never lived in such a stable and safe place. "Welcome home," said Madison, placing Gabriel's baby carrier on the sofa and holding out her hand to Olivia. "I want to show you your room. I think you'll like it." Olivia followed Madison in silence, but when the bedroom door opened, her eyes widened. The space was simple but carefully decorated. There was a bed covered in a brightly colored bedspread, a bookcase with books and some toys. In one corner, a comfortable armchair was positioned next to a crib where Gabriel would sleep. "We did a bit of decorating while you were in hospital," Madison explained, smiling. "The hospital staff wanted to help. I hope you got it right." Olivia didn't answer immediately. She walked slowly over to the bed and touched the bedspread, as if she needed to make sure it was real. Then she turned to Madison. "I've never had a room of my own," she said, her voice low and hesitant. "I always shared it with my mother. Or with my father." Madison knelt beside the bed, getting on Olivia's level. "Well, it's yours now. Both of yours. You're safe here, Olivia. I promise I'll take care of you and Gabriel, always." The girl looked at Madison, and for the first time her countenance relaxed. She nodded, but said nothing more. Madison knew it would take time to completely win her trust. The first few weeks in the new house were challenging. Olivia struggled to adjust to the idea of a place where she didn't have to live in fear. She had frequent nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night to muffled screams. Whenever this happened, Madison would come into her room, sit beside her bed, and hold her until she went back to sleep. On one of these nights, Olivia finally spoke about what haunted her. "Sometimes I hear him yelling at me," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Even though I know he's not here, I hear it." Madison stroked her hair. "It takes time for the fear to disappear, Olivia. But you're stronger than you think. Every day you prove it." Olivia turned to Madison, her eyes shining with tears. "What if he comes back? What if he finds us?" Madison held her hand tightly. "He won't. We've done everything we can to make sure of that. And if he tries, he'll have to go through me first." Madison's firm words offered Olivia a security she hadn't felt for a long time. Still, the fear remained, like a shadow that refused to go away. Over time, Olivia began to open up more. She spent hours reading the books Madison had left on her bookshelf, and loved looking after Gabriel. It was as if the baby was her anchor, something that helped her focus on the present rather than the past. One evening, while Madison was preparing dinner, Olivia sat at the table with Gabriel on her lap. She rocked the baby gently as she spoke. "Mum always said he was an angel," she commented, looking at her brother, "and I think she was right. He saved us." Madison heard from the other side of the kitchen and smiled. "I think she was right. And you're an angel too, Olivia. I don't know if you know it, but you saved Gabriel. And yourself." Olivia smiled shyly, but didn't answer. It was the first time anyone had said something like that to her. A few months later, Madison received an unexpected letter. It was from a man called Richard, who identified himself as Gabriel's biological father. He explained that he hadn't known his son existed until recently, after reading a news story about the case, but that he would like to meet him. Madison was worried. She knew how much Olivia valued her role as Gabriel's protector and feared how it might affect her. She decided to approach the subject carefully. "Olivia, can we talk?" Madison asked, taking a seat next to her on the sofa. Olivia looked at her confused, but nodded. "What's wrong?" "I got a letter from someone who claims to be Gabriel's biological father. He wants to meet you." Olivia's face turned serious. "Is he going to take Gabriel?" "He can't. He's my brother." Madison held her hand. "No one is taking Gabriel, Olivia. But maybe this man just wants to meet you. You have every right to have an opinion on that." Olivia thought for a long moment. "If he's good, then maybe, but only if he's good." Madison smiled. "That's a very mature decision, Olivia. I'm proud of you." Richard's visit went smoothly. He was kind and respected Olivia and Gabriel's boundaries. Although Olivia remained suspicious, she began to accept the idea that Gabriel might have a connection with someone other than her and Madison. As time passed, Olivia began to smile more, to open up to the idea of a life away from fear. Although the past still left its mark, the future looked brighter and brighter. On the night of Gabriel's birthday, Madison organized a small party. Olivia helped decorate the house with balloons and even prepared a small cake. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, Olivia held Gabriel on her lap and looked at Madison. "Thank you for taking care of us," she said, almost whispering. Madison smiled, her eyes full of emotion. "Thank you for letting me take care of you." And so, in the midst of chaos and pain, Olivia and Gabriel found something they'd never had before, a home where they could grow up and be loved.